السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما وعملا يا رب العالمين. أما بعد. Good evening and welcome back as we continue with our series on the fruits of faith. Tonight, inshallah, we're going to continue the topic that we began last week. Last week we began speaking about one of the fruits of faith. We could translate it as a detachment of the heart from anything other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And obviously we have to qualify that and explain that a little bit more. But in Arabic the word is zuhd. The scholars define zuhd in Arabic as هو الإعراض عن الشيء احتقارا له. Zuhd is to turn away from something because you don't really think it's that valuable. Last week we spoke about the verse in Surah Yusuf in the chapter of Joseph where Allah spoke about the people who pulled the Prophet Yusuf out of the well and they sold him for like a few coins. Allah says, وَكَانُوا فِيهِ مِنَ الزَّاهِدِينَ. They didn't know his value. So they're willing to just give him away for very little. They didn't realize the worth of it. For you to get what the item's worth, you need to know its value. Any of you ever sold something like way underpriced and you told someone afterwards and they laughed at you that you could have gotten double or triple the amount that you sold it for? Because you just didn't know. You didn't compare it to the market, like you had no idea. So to you it sounded like a good deal. You thought you ripped them off, right? Meanwhile, you got ripped off. But that's the whole idea of zuhd. Zuhd is you give up on something or you're just not that attached to it because it's not that important to you. It doesn't seem to be worth much in your eyes. We spoke about mimetic desire, which is the idea that growing up, we come to value things based on how others value them. When others like something, we really like it. And we spoke about many different things related to that. One example, for those of you who weren't able to join us, one example that we see marketers kind of capitalize on is the idea that, hey, everybody's buying it. Everybody's wearing it, so you should wear it. You don't know if it's valuable or not, but if everybody's buying it and wearing it, it must be valuable. That's the logic we use, mimetic desire. We desire things not because we know whether or not they're actually valuable, but by looking at others and seeing what they desire, we assume it must be valuable. Now, zuhd is to realize what things are actually valuable and to kind of step back and assess, maybe I've attached value to things that aren't really that valuable. And I need to kind of adjust my value system. And I think that was a pressing question that some of us left with last week was, what happens when we figure out, oh wow, I have been conditioned to value certain things that I probably shouldn't value. And there are certain things that at some level, intellectually, theoretically, I know are valuable, but I don't really feel the value of them in my heart. So what do you do about that? And we're going to talk about that inshallah later today. I want to start with a quote from Shaykh Abdul Hakim Murad in his contentions. He said, Zuhd is to make the soul feel at home in the body. Zuhd is to make the soul feel at home in the body. The human being has a physical body, but they have a soul, a spirit, a ruh. For the ruh to feel at home, comfortable, you need zuhd. You need to be detached from everything other than Allah. Does that make sense now? Now that we define zuhd in those terms, you start to make sense of why the soul would feel at home with the zuhd. The body feels at home with what? What does the body seek? Comfort. Comfort. Things that make you feel comfortable. Whether that's physical comfort in relaxation, eating foods that are tasty, going places and looking at stuff that's just really amusing or interesting. What does the soul seek? It seeks the divine. That's what it seeks. It seeks truth, beauty, goodness, wisdom, higher truths. And what zuhd does is gets you to let go of those things that aren't so important and actually focus on those things that are important. One of the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that He's created this agitation and restlessness in the human heart that prevents the heart from ever feeling fully at peace with anything other than God. This is a mercy from Allah. Have you ever thought about that? Imagine your heart could actually fully feel at peace with something other than Allah. Fully. You might never even consider turning to Allah. Why would you? Life seems perfect. Even down to the existential level, life seems good. And so you're ready. You're ready to live according to whatever it is that your heart's become attached to. It's the mercy of Allah, one that our heart just doesn't find peace in anything other than Allah. And it's almost like there's always this magnetic pull that Allah uses to draw you at any moment, and no matter how far you've drifted away, that can bring you back. Do you know what I'm talking about? Many of us would have some days in our lives that we're not so proud of. Days where maybe we drifted far away from God. And even in those days, deep down, if we reflect, we knew we weren't happy. We knew we weren't satisfied. The heart wasn't at peace. Do you know what the second blessing is that I wanted to mention? The second blessing is that Allah creates the dunya as a place that will repeatedly break your heart. And you say, like, that's a blessing? Yeah. Because if it didn't break your heart, if the dunya was just loyal to you, why would you ever give it up? Why would you ever give it up? It's loyal to you. It doesn't turn its back on you. You would hold on to it. And you never have an opportunity to turn to God. So one, the heart doesn't find peace in anything other than Allah. One. Two, the dunya that we're seeking that peace from itself keeps letting us down. And we're going to talk a little bit about that idea too. The issue of zuhd we talked about last week is really an issue of your values. See, zuhd, this detachment that we keep talking about, it actually doesn't have anything to do with physically what you have. Because a person could have nothing and still be very attached. How? We think of attachment to like things that we possess. So I own this, for example, I own this chair, now I'm attached to the chair, like it's my chair and no one can sit in it and I want to really like prioritize it. That's a physical object. How is it that how can it be possible that someone who doesn't have much can be so attached? Anyone? Yeah. Okay, one is people. Beautiful. Excellent point. You can be attached to people. But even that, you might not even have the person. What are we attached to then? I just basically spelled out limerence right there. Yeah. The thought, the idea. A person could not have much, but yet be so attached to having so much more. And that's how the Prophet ﷺ defined poverty. Is this constant focus on what you don't have. constant focus. You're attached to what you don't have. You want what you don't have. And he explains that no, actually, true richness, ghina in Arabic, which doesn't mean having a lot, it's that you want what you have. You want what you have. You're grateful for what's in your lap. That's true richness because it's a lack of wanting. And you're attached to what you actually have. And subhanAllah, the human being, because we have this ability to entertain hypotheticals. You could be in a perfectly good situation and entertain a hypothetical. You could be happy in your marriage and your mind allows you to wander and think, well, what if I married that person? And you don't ever want to do that. Because the way that will make you ungrateful for who you have. And the way your mind will paint that person in a beautiful light as though their grass is greener on the other side. So you would imagine that person to be so much better. You have a job right now, you're thinking, man, if I was there, I'd be so much better. You drive a certain car, you look at someone else's car, like if I had that, and your mind starts to hypothetically imagine what life would be like if you had that. That's poverty. That's poverty. That you have something beautiful right there in your lap, and you're in love with an idea. Because you don't even know. You don't actually know if the hypothetical that you're entertaining would play out the way you think it's going to play out. And so you're in love with an idea. And that's poverty. Zuhd is detachment, not just from physical things, but detachment from ideas. You're not overly invested. You don't lose sleep over them. You're not constantly agitated because, well, yeah, my life is good, but like if I had that, it'd be better. You're not constantly agitated. You sit and you're just, alhamdulillah. What I have, I'm so grateful for. And even this, I don't even deserve this. I'm just grateful. And you reflect on, like every day, you look at your children, you say, man, I could not ask for better children. Like these are the best children for me, truly. And that right there is what Zuhd is all about. It's about the detachment from the idea, from the perceived value in something. And that's why someone could have a lot and still possess Zuhd. Why? I think I mentioned it last week. They'd be ready to give it away in an instance. They'd be willing to give it away at the first request. Oh, you need this? Here you go. I remember one brother, he was really well off, and he lives in a really, you could say, modest home. I mean, it's a nice home, but it's modest. And one day he was talking about why. He said, I could buy a much bigger house. And he's like, I know I could do that. He said, people ask me, why don't you get a bigger one? He said, you know why? He said, because I don't want an Islamic cause to show up at my door, ask for money, and I can't give them the money because I wanted 7 extra washrooms. Because I wanted 7 extra washrooms. He says, I didn't want that to happen. And so he intentionally, that's detachment. Because I'm sure somewhere in his mind, having this massive house that would give you this certain, confer upon you this status among people, like, this person lives in a mansion. Somewhere in his mind it's probably there. But he purposefully reminded himself, no, that's not truly what I want. What I'm truly going to be satisfied with is what I have. And I feel more satisfied in taking that wealth and putting it towards a good cause. I mean, that's detachment. And that's not a common, that's a very unique and rare trait, mashallah. May Allah grant us all tawfiq in our capacities to be people like that, who know what's important in life and don't allow other things to distract us from prioritizing those important things. Because that's what Zuhd's all about. See, sometimes we find ourselves craving for those things and inclined towards those things that are other than God. Shaykh Abdul Hakim Murad, he says, only when we are distant from God do we crave what is distant from God. Only when we're distant from God do we crave what is distant from God. And we can tie this in with the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, where he said, Al-mar'u ala dini khalili. A person is on the way of their friend. If the people around you are people who are obsessed with material possessions, and they're obsessed with wealth, and they're obsessed with status and power, it's highly likely that you will also be obsessed with that. Highly likely. And if they're obsessed with things that are far from God, you will likely end up being with them and like them and being distant from God and craving what is distant from God. Back to the idea of mimetic desire. My friend circle will impact and influence what I like, what I think is important and valuable. Have you ever seen children growing up in a family? They often like the sports team that the family likes. Have you noticed that? Like the family of Leafs fans, and then the kids growing up become Leafs fans too. I've seen that in my family with, my nephews and stuff. Right? They like the Leafs. I've shown them objectively how bad the Leafs are. Right? And they're just like, no. The culprit's my elder brother. He's the one who's influenced everybody, right? SubhanAllah. We will crave what is distant from God when we are distant from Him. And so if we ask the question, why are my values what they are? In part because maybe our environment and surrounding kind of pushes us in that direction, but in part because we are distant from God. And what you'll notice is as you start to try to spend more time with people who are trying to get closer to God, you'll start to notice a shift in your values. And naturally, you might even begin to grow further away from others. And you feel so restless sitting around talking about things that at some level you're like, this is so pointless. Why are we talking about this? This is toxic. This is not even healthy. Why are we here gossiping about so and so? Why are we not talking about like how we're gonna maximize benefit from the month of Ramadan? Why are we not talking about like the upcoming something to better ourselves and become better people? Why are we not talking about how we can give back to our community? You see how these are like more lofty aspirations? And we're not trying to sound really pretentious or anything. But I think at some level, most of society would agree that certain behaviors are more virtuous than others. So it's really, I think for us, a moment of reflection to look around and say, who do I choose to surround myself with? And how is that shaping my values? See, it's interesting because we often choose people based on our values. So initially, we are the ones who choose them. But then as we continue to experience life, we might start to question, is this really what I want? And that's really what it comes down to as you get older, is you're not doomed to like what you were conditioned to like. So many of you were probably brought up a certain way, conditioned to like certain things. You got to a certain point and you said, no, that's not for me. Right? You just chose not to pursue it anymore. You chose not to be interested in it anymore. It just wasn't what you wanted. Because you started to critically ask yourself, what do I want? This is what society's told me. This is what my family's told me. And you get to a point you say, maybe not. Maybe I want something different. But the question becomes, when you go to choose something different, what do you choose? What do you choose? So, show of hands, guys. Let's have honesty hour for a moment. How many of you growing up, your family encouraged you to dress a certain way and certain clothes? And then when you hit teenage years, you were like, nope, that's not going to be my wardrobe anymore. I'm going to change that up. How many of y'all did that? Because you got to a point and you didn't allow yourself to be conditioned anymore, and you said, I'm going to choose something different. But the question becomes, did you choose what you wanted? That's how we would frame it, right? We would say, no, I want to wear what I want to wear, which is not true. Likely, the new thing that you wanted to wear was influenced by who? Your friends. So you just went from basing your desires on what your family wanted to now basing your desires on what your friends wanted. And life continues in that way. We continue to be inspired by the newest trends. That's an interesting idea too. Who sets the trends? Who sets the trends? Because then they tell us what to desire. There's a new clothing line released, right? A certain trend, a certain style. And now people are like, I guess that's what I'm expected to desire. Because if you were left to your own imagination, design your next, style of clothing. You probably like, I'm kind of happy with what I'm wearing right now. But then it becomes a trend. So now you're like, oh no, I can't keep wearing this. I have to wear that. So it's like, manufacturing consent. It's like manufacturing desire. Here's what we need you to desire. And for someone who's outside of these kind of, not really into the whole, what's the newest trend when it comes to certain clothing, it's really confusing. Right? Like I've met people and they've told me to spend a certain amount of money on like a jacket or something, and I was like, whoa. I did not know that people would spend that much money on a jacket like that. Right? Like in my head, I was like, it's not something I would do. But I'm not blaming them because they're coming from a circle, from an environment where that is something to desire. So they've been conditioned that this is worth the $800 I just spent on it. Right? I don't think my parents can imagine that's possible that people are spending $800 on a jacket. Do you know, like if my parents heard that, they would just be like, it's qiyamah. Like for them, the world would be coming to an end. Like whoever does that. I'm just like, no, but it's manufacturing desire. And I don't know about you, but personally, I get really agitated if I feel someone's trying to manipulate me. So I feel like these companies are trying to manipulate me. Like, you want me to pay that much? Like, nah, I'm not paying that much, right? It's very interesting though, the way human beings are. I want to share a hadith here from the Prophet ﷺ, where a man came to him, and look at the question the man asked. There's a saying attributed to the Prophet ﷺ where he said, "Husnu su'ali nisful ilm." Half of knowledge is to ask excellent questions. Because based on what you ask, that's the response you get. So look what this man asks. He comes to the Prophet of Allah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he says, "O Prophet of God, can you inform me of an action that if I do it, Allah will love me and the people will love me?" Like, that's a beautiful question. It's not like I want to make Allah happy, but then people are really upset. Or I make people happy, but then Allah is really displeased. He's like, no, Ya Allah, I want both. Tell me of O Prophet of Allah, tell me of an action that both Allah will love me and the people will love me. And the Prophet ﷺ's response was zuhd. He said, detach yourself from what people have and they'll love you. And detach yourself from material possessions of the dunya. Detach yourself from the dunya, rather. He didn't say material possessions. He said dunya, which we could translate as this world. And Allah will love you. Zuhd. That's what it will do for you. Okay, let's break this down. When we talk about renouncing what people possess, give up desiring what people possess, why would people love you for that? Because essentially they would feel that you're using them, right? It's like the guy, in high school, the guy who gets a new car, like he gets his license before everybody. You know that person who gets licensed before everybody and then their parents give them a car? Suddenly everybody's their friend. Everybody's their friend. They had friends they didn't even know about. And deep down though, they know what? They know that people don't really care about them. They care about the ride they're going to be able to get to wherever they want to go. And eventually the individual goes, I'm tired of this. Everyone's just using me. Because people don't like the person, they like what the person has and how that possession can benefit them. And that's something to think about. When people meet you, are you suspicious of why they're becoming your friend? For those who are gifted with a lot from Allah, blessed with a lot of something, status, knowledge, wealth, whatever it is, it can become difficult for them. Because every time they meet somebody, they're like, are you meeting me for me or for what associating with me can do for you? And it becomes a challenge. So when someone can convey to the person, hey, I want nothing to do with whatever you have. I just love you for you. I love you for you. That's a beautiful thing. And the individual feels so appreciated because they know that this individual, no matter if I have a lot or I don't, no matter if I'm really, really prominent in society or I'm just a normal person, this person is loyal to me for who I am. And so the Prophet ﷺ told us, be a person that when you engage with people, engage with them for who they are. Love them for who they are, not for what they for what they can do for you. One person was telling me how it really upset him. He works in a really, really like popular, prominent company. People aspire to work for that company. So he said he walked into this gathering once and he met some people, and he said nobody really paid attention to him. They were just kind of talking, and he was just kind of like, oh, whatever, and people were talking to somebody else. Everyone's kind of focusing on someone else. And eventually people started asking, hey, so what do you guys do? And everyone started mentioning what they did. And this individual said, I mentioned what I did, where I worked. He said, man, the way the conversation shifted. Suddenly everyone was interested in me. Oh, hey, really? You work there? Oh, I'm really interested. I'm actually studying this right now. Networking. The networking started. He said, I felt so uncomfortable, he said, that these people don't care about me. Not one of these people actually cares about me. All the attention they're giving me right now is because of the company I work in. And he goes, why would I want to be friends and close to people that I'm not even confident that they care about me? That the moment I'm able to help them get a job, they just move on. Like what kind of relationship is this? And so he told me, he's like, yeah, I don't tell people where I work. Isn't it interesting? Like he spent most of his life aspiring to get into that company. He got in, he's working there, mashallah, and now he can't even tell people? It's so fascinating to me. Because like you have to walk in and be like, yeah, I kind of work in tech. Oh, where? Oh, just a little company, like he doesn't want to say it. Because once he says it, he's like, oh no, now they're all going to be. It's so fascinating, the human being. Izhad fima inda nas yuhibbaka nas. Become a person that's just not interested in what people have and what they possess. You're just genuinely interested in them, who they are. You want to know their story, and you want to know what you can do for them. And those are the people that will love you. Right? Al-Hasan al-Basri, he said exactly this. He said, لا تزال كريما على الناس. You will remain dignified and honorable in the eyes of the people. And they will continue to honor you so long as you don't express a desire for what they possess. فَإِذَا فَعَلْتَ ذَلِكَ, he said, if you do that, اسْتَخَفُّوا بِكَ. They'll think you to be very, very light, is a literal translation. اسْتَخَفُّوا بِكَ. They'll think of you to not be really worthy of their time and attention. Oh, this person is just another person who's trying to use me. وَكَرِهُ حَدِيثَكَ. They won't even want to talk to you, he says. They won't even want to talk to you. Why? Because they'll know that any conversation will be about how you can benefit from them. And finally, وَأَبْغَضُوكَ, and they'll really dislike you. And so that's the first thing he told this man. He said, just learn to not desire what people have. Right? Desire good for people, not the good that the people themselves have. Just desire good for them. Be there for them. Support them. And that's why a lot of people will say, who do, progress in life, they will say that their closest friends are those who were with them when they had nothing. Because they know what? This person doesn't just like me for what I have. They loved me even when I had nothing. And so that's the first thing. The second, when it comes to earning the love of Allah, the Prophet ﷺ said, "Izhad fi dunya, yuhibbak Allah." Do not be overly attached to the world. And if you can do that, Allah will love you. So the dunya is not restricted to physical and material possessions. It refers to anything that will take you away from Allah. The pursuit of status, power, relationships, people. Like many different things will take you away. Now, here's a question to ask. Why is it that we will attach to the dunya, to things in this world, and in the process we put ourselves in difficult and often heartbreaking situations? Why do we do that? Any ideas? Because Allah tells us very clearly what we're meant to be attaching ourselves to. And yet we find ourselves doing what? I know what Allah said. He said I shouldn't do this. I shouldn't pursue that. But we end up pursuing it. We end up doing that. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Fear. The fear of not pursuing, the fear of the repercussions of not pursuing, the fear of missing out on something. Fear can drive us. If we're to dig even a little deeper than that, just going off the point about fear, right? Even before experiencing fear, we do associate a certain value with something. That value itself is questionable. And I want to talk about that because I really think Zuhd is all about the value that you assign to things. I think that's what it's about. Whether or not then I pursue it or not, or I'm worried about missing out. We're only worried about missing out on things that we think are valuable. So we have to even step back and go, wait, have I even correctly attributed value to this thing here? And Allah in the Quran, He tells us that it's very possible that a human being, their nafs, their desires, their appetites, can beautify something to make it appear valuable. بَلْ سَوَّلَتْ لَكُمْ أَنفُسُكُمْ أَمْرًا. The Prophet Yaqub told his sons who had thrown Yusuf in a well, after they came back and said, "Oh, our father, a wolf ate Yusuf." And the father said, "Rather, no. Your souls have tempted you into doing something that you think is good. It's not good to harm your brother, but somehow at some level you've been convinced that to harm him is actually good for you." And he says your nafs has done that. Your greed, your desire, your appetite for your father's love, that has caused you to misunderstand the true value of your action. So you think it's good when in fact it's extremely harmful. In the story of the Prophet Musa, there's this man named Samiri. After Samiri deceives these people, the people of Musa, when Musa asks him, "Why did you deceive my people?" He said, "My nafs tempted me. It just felt like I felt like doing it. It felt like the right thing to do. It felt like a good thing. It seemed appealing." Allah says about shaitan in the Quran that sometimes shaitan will make a person's actions seem beautiful to them. They'll tell themselves they're doing a good thing. So let's explore this now. I want to give you an example here to highlight the point I'm trying to make. Imagine you value something, but you're not allowed to do it, or you're not able to do it. You're going to feel that you're missing out. You're going to fear the missed opportunity, right? What's very fascinating is different people can evaluate the same thing in different ways. So let me give you an example. I've met multiple people, and I've had conversations with them where they really couldn't understand how I could be enjoying life without drinking alcohol. They're like, "You don't drink?" Any of y'all ever had that? Where they're like, "Really? So what do you do for fun?" That's like the question, right? What do you do for fun? And it's so fascinating because I'm sitting there going, "You poor soul." Right? Like, I don't even want to see you on Saturday morning. Your state. Friday night, what goes on, and then Saturday morning you're hungover. I don't want to see that. I don't want to be that person either. That's terrible. The amount of videos you see online of people who do really foolish things when they're drunk, right? You just like, subhanAllah, who wants to be that? But it's so fascinating that they look at us and go, "What? What's wrong? You guys don't know what you're missing out on." And it's such an interesting like paradox because we look at them and say the same thing. We're like, "You do this," but we understand. We understand that they think the only way for them to have fun and really enjoy life is through drinking. And meanwhile, they've been deceived into believing that. Which is why they look at us who are able to enjoy our lives totally without alcohol and go, "How is it possible?" Because they've attributed a value to alcohol which doesn't actually exist. It's like alcohol will be the source of your joy and happiness. And we don't view alcohol in that light. We see it to be very harmful. I mean, how much money do they spend? Have you ever seen like the stores? They just pop up everywhere. It's like, how many people are buying alcohol all the time? How much money do people spend? It's funny, we have a society that complains about groceries, right? Well, we need grocery money. I was like, well, shut down those. Money's going towards that. Someone's spending it on that. But it's almost like, what is our society without that? That's the level we've gotten to. Now, I purposely gave that example first. Let's turn it inwards now for a moment. Because some of us, may Allah help us, may Allah really open our eyes, open our hearts. Some of us are kind of like those alcoholics when it comes to sin. We sin, we see somebody who doesn't sin, who doesn't do those sinful behaviors that maybe we're engaged in, and we're like, "Man, life must be mad boring. How do you guys have a good time without doing all these sins?" Do you see the same thing here? Because it's almost like we've been conditioned to believe that if I don't sin, if I try to get close to God, my life's going to be super boring. It's going to be terrible. Look at all these people having a great time whilst they're sinning. Are you with me on this point here? Because we've mistakenly believed that the joy found in sin cannot be found in the obedience of Allah. But meanwhile, you'll have people who don't sin. And they're like, y'all do all these things to try to be happy when you could just be happy by leaving that sin, because happiness is from God. God's the one who gives happiness. Do you see that? It's hard to imagine when in your head all you can think about is the pleasure. And that's where there's this thing, this idea called the easy method of quitting smoking. And it was a book written some time ago, and since then people have taken this method and applied it to different addictions. But essentially the philosophy is this: people struggle to give up a behavior because when they do try to give up, they always feel like they're depriving themselves of some good. So they falsely attribute some good to the behavior, and then when they're not engaging in the behavior, they feel like, oh, I'm just missing out. Oh my God, I could be so much happier. When deep down, every single time they do it, they feel guilty. They feel shameful. They feel like their self-worth goes down. He says it's a misevaluation of the situation. Those who are not engaged in those behaviors actually feel really good about themselves because they know they're not harming themselves. Because they know they're not harming their lungs, for example. So it's almost like recalibrating what you find to be valuable and important. That's what the book aims to do. Because if you think about it, why do we turn to addictions to begin with? People often think of addictions as the problem or the disease. And we want to attack people who are addicted to something, and we want to shame them because they don't have enough willpower and self-discipline. And really, it seems like that's a fundamental misunderstanding of why people turn to addictions. People turn to coping mechanisms, sometimes very unhealthy ones. And then, because that unhealthy coping mechanism at least temporarily removes the pain that they're going through, they believe this is something that's good for me. Not realizing that in the grand scheme of things, it's actually worsening my situation. But they don't see that. They just see the immediate temporary relief from the pain. So they do it again and again, and then it becomes an addiction. Because they never once sat down and asked themselves, wait, what is the root here? What is the pain? And is there another healthier way to cope with this pain? The question is not, why are you addicted to this? The question is, what pain are you trying to escape from? That you turn to this. That you really think that this is giving you relief. And so we're attached to this thing now. That's why it's so hard to take it away from people. You say like, hey, give me this. Give me the pack of cigarettes. Give me this. And they fight you. No. Because in their eyes, this is so valuable. You're taking something extremely valuable away from me. And the person taking it's trying to say, no, actually, me taking it away is more valuable. It's more important. Do you get that? And so the devil comes along and really adorns certain behaviors. Oh, you know how much you'd enjoy that? Do you know how much you would enjoy that? How much pleasure you'll get from it? And so what does one do? How do you detach? When you find out that, oh my God, in my life, I have attributed value to things that I shouldn't have. How do I detach from them? Where do I go from there? Shaykh Abdul Hakim Murad, he says, there is no true engagement without detachment. Meaning what? When you detach from something, you do have to have something else to attach to. You can't just detach and kind of float around. Life's not easy. You need coping mechanisms. You need things that will help you. What are they? What will you turn to? And that's where we turn to those things that are truly valuable. Allah says in the Quran, and I'm going to talk a little bit about, really trying to form values now. Allah tells us in the Quran, بَلْ تُؤْثِرُونَ الْحَيَاةَ الدُّنْيَا. Allah says, rather, you people, you prefer this worldly life. Whereas, وَالْآخِرَةُ خَيْرٌ وَأَبْقَى. Whereas the hereafter is better and everlasting. One of the ways that Allah wants us to realize why this dunya is not worth attaching to more than the hereafter, it's just how temporary it is. How temporary it is. And you could apply that not just to the dunya as a whole, but even to the sinful pleasures. Sinful pleasures or bad habits. How often do we ruin our diet? Because it's like, you know what, it won't hurt. I'll feel better. And while you're eating the food, it tastes really good. And once you're done the meal, you sit there, what? Feeling so much guilt. Shoot, messed it up again. 7th week in a row, I said I'm going to be starting today, right? Just keep delaying. That's the thing. In the moment you enjoy, and down the line you regret. That's the story of the dunya. In the moment you enjoy, but down the line you regret. And so what do you actually... So like, the dunya is really just a place of, at a macro level, delayed gratification. That's what the dunya is, at a macro level. You apply it at a micro level to each individual behavior and action, yes. But as a whole, that's what it is. The test of this world, of this life. So this brings us to the question. What, if we want to sit down and reflect on, number one, how do I know what is valuable? How does one go about even determining the true value of something? One way to do this, which I typically, this is the framework I work with, is a thing is as valuable as the extent to which it fulfills the purpose. So let's use an example. When you're at university, right? You're in university, you're enrolled in your program. What's the purpose? Ultimately, what's the end goal? Why are you there? To walk out with what? Right? A degree. To graduate with a degree. That's the purpose. I mean, obviously, you can talk about education, all that kind of stuff, but if we just kind of simplify it, to walk out with that degree, which requires that you have the knowledge and information, pass the exams, all of that. Okay. What's the most important thing for a student to do in university? The most valuable action they can engage in? To graduate ultimately, but prior, like in the process. Focus on the studies. Study. Right? If someone says the most important thing in university is social life, what would we say? No, we could make that second. Maybe second. Why would we not make it number one? Isn't a social life really fun? Isn't that like a lot of people discover so much about the world in university? It does not contribute to fulfilling the purpose of university to the greatest extent. It does contribute. You do need a social life, a healthy social life, yes. But more importantly, and something that contributes even more to the purpose of graduating, is studying. And so you have a moment where you have a test exam the next day, and your social life comes along and says, let's do this. And you have to make a decision now. No, but I have an exam tomorrow. I need to study. You have a decision to make. Can you prioritize what you know to be more valuable? You know it's more valuable to study, and you know that because you know this is going to contribute far more to my graduation than this social life. The extent to which something helps you fulfill the purpose determines its value. What is the purpose of your life? What is the purpose of your life? And what actions, what things, which people Which ideas will contribute the most to fulfilling that purpose? Those would be the most valuable things for you in your life. They should be. They should be the most valuable things. Currently, you still value things. The question becomes, the things that you currently value, what purpose are they serving? What purpose are they serving because of which they are deemed so valuable in your eyes? So imagine there's somebody in university who on that night before the exam says, I'm going out with my friends. What message are they basically sending the world? That their purpose in university is what? To have a good time. They're willing to risk not graduating. They might fail, GPA plummets. They're willing to risk it. Because in their eyes, it seems, and even if they're not aware of it, they might not even explicitly be willing to say it, but their actions and values are showing that their greatest priority is to have a good time. That they're willing to risk even not graduating. Some of us will say the Shahada, La ilaha illallah, Muhammadur Rasulullah, which essentially is a declaration before God that, oh God, you are the number one priority in my life. That's what it really means. But when we go about our lives and we look at the types of decisions we make, the things that we value, that tells us a little bit about what we think our purpose is, actually. Does that make sense? So when you start to investigate your values, you cannot do so by ignoring your purpose. What is your purpose? Allah tells us very clearly in the Quran, your purpose in life is to serve Allah. Now there's many ways to do this. And we're all positioned slightly differently to do so. So there's different ways that we will serve Allah, different ways that we will please Him and live a life that He is pleased with us. But first, number one, we have to accept that is our purpose. We have to sit down and face the reality that one day I'm going to die. That's why the Quran keeps reminding us of this. Is, hey, you're going to die. All these other things you think are your purpose, to have fun, to go do this, to go do that, to eat this, to consume that, that's all going to come to an end. And then what? Then what happens? What are you going to do in your grave? What was the whole purpose of your life? What answer will you have to give to God? And then you start thinking, yeah, like that kid who's about to, not study for the exam. What do we tell them? What are you going to tell your parents? When you don't graduate, okay, fine, you don't graduate. And all your classmates move on. And you go home, and you stand in front of your parents. What are you going to tell them? Why didn't you graduate? It's like, you're right, man, I can't do that. I do need to really think carefully about my behaviors and why I'm here. Same thing for the believer in life. So Allah repeatedly tells us, this life is temporary. You're going to die. So there has to be a purpose to why you're living. You're here to serve Allah. He created you. He put you here. Okay. What does He want from you so that He would be pleased with you? What are the actions? Suddenly, I can't just choose to treat people how I want to. Why? Because how I treat someone will impact whether or not God is pleased with me. Every interaction is going to impact whether or not I'm fulfilling my purpose. And now I start to take every action of mine seriously. Let me be the best to everybody around me. Let me stay away from certain behaviors. It does not contribute to my ultimate purpose. So you need to have your purpose very clear. That purpose should inform what you deem to be valuable in life. You should then form goals that will align with fulfilling your purpose. Broader goals. And then you need to have daily behaviors to meet those goals. And those behaviors, you need to develop yourself to be somebody who can execute those behaviors. And that's when a person has a framework whereby they're actually living a life according to values that they have carefully selected, not been just conditioned to believe, but they truly believe these are the right actions and things to value. Why? Because they're also clear about what their purpose is. Does this make sense? So it takes a lot of reflection on what's my true purpose in life. When I pass away, no one's going to the grave with me. Today we prayed a janazah of 2 people. A young 1.5-year-old toddler, little girl, and a 43-year-old woman. Death does not discriminate. We prayed the janazahs after Dhuhr here today. And we don't have a guarantee. What are we doing with our time? What's my purpose? Why did God put me on earth? What skills did He give me? You know, people talk about being gifted. If you're gifted, it means you have something to offer the world. You've been gifted something to now give and share with others. What is it? What has God uniquely positioned you to do? Given you the skills for, given you the passion for? What can you offer the world? In a way that pleases God, because that's the ultimate purpose. And you figure out what those goals are that will help you. Because some people are really passionate about knowledge, and that's a blessing. If Allah gives you this thirst for knowledge, and that's from Allah. Because there's some people who are like, Shaykh, I really want to read, man. I just can't read. Like, I sit down and I'm just like, what am I doing here? But like, if you put them volunteering somewhere, they love it. They will run around. They will take care of everybody. Like, this is one person I know. We call her like the MVP volunteer. MashaAllah. The way she just like takes care of the whole event every single time. Right? It's just natural. You could try to teach someone it, but for some people, natural. And she finds it so fulfilling. Some people just love knowledge. Some people love service. They like to social support, be there for people. Allah's gifted different people in different ways. So there's many different ways to fulfill your purpose of pleasing God. Align, your purpose with values. Develop those goals. Start to chart out daily behaviors to meet those goals in line with the values that fulfill the purpose. And to actually execute those behaviors, you need to have developed yourself. Because you could outline all the behaviors you want in the world, but if you can't get yourself to execute on them, forget it. You procrastinate, and you don't have you have cowardice. You're scared. You're a people pleaser. You're just worried about keeping people happy, so you don't want to actually go out and make someone upset by pursuing what you believe in. Self-development lies at the core of it all. Does that make sense? May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us tawfiq to be people that live lives that are purposeful and meaningful, that are in alignment with our values. Live lives where we're daily concerned about what the ultimate end result will be of our lives. May He grant us tawfiq to really reflect on our values and ensure that they're aligned with what pleases God. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه أجمعين والحمد لله رب العالمين. Go ahead. Yeah. Zuhd, just for those of you who weren't able to hear, Zuhd is that you keep the dunya in your hand and not in your heart. Right? The way to not feel so much pain over losing something is to not grip it so tightly to begin with. Yeah. People of inclination, who have an inclination towards what's called Sufism, yeah, they tend to incline towards the concept of Zuhd. I mean, Zuhd's in the Quran and Hadith. So regardless of who actually inclines towards it, when we look to the Quran and the Hadith, this is what we find. The idea that our number one priority in life has to be Allah. Yeah. On that point you were making about One person defined zuhud as trusting more in Allah than what you have in your hand. There's a story. Has anyone ever heard of Mullah Nasruddin? There's this character in Islamic, literature and history. He's called Mullah Nasruddin, and he's a joke about. There's a lot of jokes about like really kind of. Anyone know Don Quixote? It's like the Don Quixote of like Islamic literature. Um, so there's a story about him one day where he's walking. He's going to the market. He's going to buy some meat. He got some money in his hand. So his friend asks him, "Where are you going?" He said, "I'm going to the marketplace to buy meat." His friend said, "Say inshallah." Like, why? I have money in my hand. The market's right there. It's open. I can see the meat inside. So I don't need to say inshallah. Trusted in the money. And along the way, got robbed. Got robbed of the money. He didn't make it to the marketplace. So he goes there, tries to bargain. The guy's like, if you don't have money, I'm not giving you meat. So he's coming back empty-handed. His friend's like, "Hey, where's the meat?" He says, "The robbers stole it, inshallah." Right? Like the robbers stole it, inshallah. It's like he trusted what was in his hand. He didn't trust that Allah would be the one who would make it happen. That's zuhud, right? That you're not so attached to the thing. Jazakallah khair for sharing. Any questions about what I was trying to explain? The idea of trying to reevaluate your values. Did the framework make sense? Okay. Now, the framework makes sense in terms of like concept. When you sit down to try to like apply it to your life, it's not going to be as easy. I'm just going to tell you. It's going to be a long process of trying to figure this out. Right? So, some things look really good on paper, but when you try to bring it into life, it can be a lot more messy than this. And the human being is so interesting because sometimes you're going to have some values that align with your purpose, and you just got these random values that just can't seem to let go of whatever else there's going on in your life and what you used to like. And so one author, he writes, we don't need to only have tawheed in our beliefs, we need to have tawheed in our beings, where all parts of us are directed in the same direction. Currently, it feels like some part of us wants to move towards Allah, and a part of us is like, "Nah, but this jahiliyyah back here is pretty good. Let's stay back here." And you got this war going on. Tawheed is for your entire being to face one direction and be working towards it. So may Allah Ta'ala grant us tawfiq, inshallah. Alright guys, jazakumullah khair. We will see you next week, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.